girls still, and this irritates me a lot, but still in 2023.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the MediaNord podcast. I'm your host, Skjalg, and I study first-year film here at Nord University Levanger. And doing most of the hosting today will be Sunniva from second-year Games and Entertainment Technology. Today, we will be interviewing Helga, who is an associate professor of the Games program and diversity advocate here at Nord. So, without further ado, hello, and welcome to another installment of the MediaNord podcast. Today with me, I've got co-host Sunniva.
Hello.
So, Helga, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Helga Dis Isfold Sigurdardottir, and I am an associate professor at Nord University, which means I'm a teacher and researcher at the Games and Entertainment Technology Studies.
And I have been your student. I saw you last year.
It's true.
I miss you.
We'll meet again.
It's as a part of being a teacher on the Games and Entertainment Technology, you are been an executive for many a Game Lab team.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Game Lab is the structure that every year students get into teams and they make a game. And at the end of that term, they have finished making the game.
Yes.
And you are the only female teacher I've had during my 4 terms.
Yeah, we are 2 female teachers who have like full positions at the Games and Entertainment Technology. But the other one, Lina Kulos, she has her hands full because she is the program coordinator. Mm. So she has only a little teaching in the 3rd year. That's it. That's why you haven't seen her so much. Yeah. But then again, we aren't that many teachers. So if you think about it percent-wise, I suppose our percentage of female staff is better than in most of the game industry, actually. So,
how did you get into the game industry?
Well, I don't think I've ever actually gotten into the game industry as such, but I went a long way. I started. I didn't get into university at all until I was 25. Before that, I was just hanging around, traveling, hitchhiking. I don't recommend that though, but it felt safe back in those days, in the 90s. It wasn't, but it felt like that.
No, I think we had a high concentration of serial killers at the time. But
no, you're thinking of the 80s.
Yeah. But you made it so far.
And then when I did go into university, I went into anthropology because traveling and seeing places made me interested in people. So I thought that was a good starting point. And then after that, surprisingly, I didn't get a job in anthropology or anything related. So I figured, okay, I'll do something more practical. And so I became a teacher. I went and got myself a master's degree in education. And then on top of that, I took the teacher certificate. Yeah. So I'm a certified teacher.
Good.
And
that must be reassuring, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually we also at the Games, we actually have a higher percentage of certified teachers than at most of the other studies. And that's just a coincidence, but that we can come back to that later. Huh. But then I still sort of had a hard time finding my path. I was doing a lot of sort of project leading, evaluation work and things like that. But at the same time, my main interest was in engaging teaching methods, like teaching methods that would add something to the regular classroom teaching. And then I started getting interested in games. So I started applying for PhD scholarships in Games for Learning. Which is how I ended up in Steinkjer in Nord University, which was back then called HINT. And I did my PhD on Games for Learning. And that's the professional bit of it. But along the way, obviously, I had a lot of friends and acquaintances working in the game industry. It always felt like a little bit of a part of my life, even if it wasn't really a big gamer. I mean, I had kids and stuff, and I've never been into like huge AAAs. It's just been like easy stuff, mobile gaming and things like that. But I had friends who were making AAA games, and I've had a lot of connections in the industry that I wasn't really aware of, because you don't think of your friends as connections until you realize there might be something to it. So I would say I have a fair insight into the industry, and that has also helped me in focusing on my shaping my focus areas, which have become increasingly the industry and sort of careers within the industry, focusing very much on diversity, inclusion, the demographics of the industry, and so on.
Speaking of like diversity and inclusion and trying to focus on that, I think I told you, but I was recently at GDC. Mm-hmm. I won the Women in Games Scholarship.
Wow, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So they sent me to San Francisco to attend the game design conference. And during that time, we had some round tables and such with basically all women in the games industry, trying to get us women into the game industry. Yeah. And it's a lot of people had the same sort of path as you, where you start out with something completely different. We talked to this one lady who started as a geographer, and then she, her most recent project was working on the new Star Wars game. Yeah. So she sort of took that path. There's a lot of sociology. One was a kindergarten teacher, and then she got into King, and now she helps make Candy Crush, a kind of path. Can you talk about the steps you have taken sort of in your professional life as a teacher to focus on diversity and inclusion in your classroom or in your career? Because I was part of a workshop, among other things, that was hosted by you and your husband.
Yeah. My husband is also my coworker, so just for those who don't know, I didn't just bring the whole family in for
I just invite him along. He gets so lonely at home, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know really where to start with that one, but I guess it sort of felt sort of natural along the way, because I saw that from the very beginning when I started at the games studies. We saw that within all the 3 technology-related studies that we have at the Faculty of Social Sciences, there was a very uneven gender distribution. Yeah. And we saw that there were again and again cases where, everything between just subtle things like we noticed that the girls would drop out. First of all, fewer of them would apply. Few of them would actually show up and start, and then more of them would drop out. To sort of more blatant, obvious harassment cases, and those cases kept coming up, and we saw that we needed to do something. And I guess me being the new one and the female and everything,
the token woman,
yeah, exactly. I sort of both felt inclined and maybe also to some extent was expected to do something about it. So the first thing that we did was that I tried to integrate it, some sort of an increased focus on diversity in a course that's still being taught and is now called the Ethics and Professionalism course. It was back then, it's been in different years. When I started teaching in it, it was on the 3rd year, and it was moved to the 1st year, so it made sense to have it in the 1st year with that focus. It didn't really go well, because this was like 12 years ago. Yeah. And just to say the word like discrimination, sexism, harassment, whatever. Misogyny in this environment, it was just a social professional suicide. And there was a lot of, I suppose, I'm not blaming it on the students per se. I just think it was a very hot topic, and I wasn't experiencing how to address it either. Yeah. And it was like socially, the social awareness was way less on these things. Yeah. So it was really hard to address it in the beginning, and I don't think I did a particularly good job at it either, but I just kept sort of working on it, kept asking for advice from people who know more, people who have more experience, kept bringing in guest lecturers. And then along that way, I got a lot of good contacts. So we made some projects around these issues. And the most prominent project that was also sort of the one that I feel that we may slightly have had some impact was called Girls Just Wanna Have Fundamental IT Skills, which was a cooperation between several universities in the Scandinavian region. And our focus was on upper and lower secondary school level girls, and sort of trying to first of all, get their points of view, but also at the same time trying to motivate them, trying to show them how fun it can be to work with technology.
Yeah.
That it's not just about sitting in by a computer screen and punching in numbers, but it's actually about creating and sort of, when you know how to do that, you can create basically anything in the world. There are no limits. So we did several workshops, but then COVID came and ruined everything.
Yeah, as it did.
But we tried to keep on working on it with different measures. We tried some online events, and we tried also to just focus on gathering data through surveys. And we're still processing at least one of those surveys. Throughout this, I've managed to publish a couple of papers. And I am also, before the pandemic, I also started interviewing recruiters in the industry about what they're looking for and how the gender and diversity factor. And it's not only about gender, obviously. It's about ethnicity. It's about everything, social orientation, your physical abilities, and what have you. So how the diversity perspectives sort of affect their choices. And that has also been on ice for a while now, but I'm also working on getting that project up and going. It makes things a little bit extra difficult now that I'm actually on a leave for the time being because of illness in the family. So everything is on hold, but I'm hoping it's things that I'm motivated to keep on doing. So I'm hoping to continue as soon as I get back.
Do you still sort of feel like that, the token woman in your career?
Not so much here because I'm in academia, and even if I'm like one of very few, one of two in the games department. Yeah. We still feel like, I think we identify more as just a university rather than a games environment. But I would definitely feel that way if I was. If the same environment would be the industry, I suppose I'd still feel that way.
Yeah, I think my first year, one of our teachers, Stephen Forge, he told us one of his favorite jokes, which is, no, there's many women in the games industry. I know both of them.
Yes.
Which is sort of true for the classes I've seen, at least, the third years and now the first years. There are women, but not a lot. There were, when we started, there was one that showed up to the start of term. It was Marta, and she was alone. And she's told me about this, sitting in the auditorium the first day and looking around. And she's literally the only girl. Okay. And she was terrified and didn't know if she wanted to stay. But then I arrived a week late because I was somewhere else. Right. And then Jan arrived. She was held up by COVID, so she was stuck in Vietnam until she could get here. Yeah. And the year after, Marta joined, so... you said there was a pattern of girls dropping off.
Yeah, actually, you're
we gain girls. Yeah, we keep picking them up.
Yeah, okay, keep that going.
We are trying. But you said that a lot of things get put on pause because you are currently on leave.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the responsibilities of trying to teach about diversity and hold the university up to a certain standard, does it fall a lot on your shoulders? And if you're not there, it doesn't get done?
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I suppose that in the way that I am more aware and I see the need, and I have thus been often the one who takes the initiative, yes, but I would not say that I feel that my male colleagues just dump it on me or anything like that. It's rather just that I'm quicker to take the initiative. And now I have made it clear to everyone that because I'm away, I will not be taking the lead on the current initiatives within the studies, although I got funding for a project that I'm really motivated for. Oh, cool. So I hope that by fall I can start fully working on that project, where I will then have a key role. But it is important, and I think all of us at the department agree that it is important that we work together as one on this goal, because none of us wants to create a bad environment. It's not good for anyone if there is discrimination. It doesn't matter if it's the the women or the men or any other genders or any, any minority ethnicities or whatever. If the environment isn't inclusive, it isn't good for anyone.
Yeah, especially considering games is such a creative endeavor. A lot of people probably think about programming when they think about developing games.
Yeah.
And they think about numbers and, as you mentioned, sitting in front of a computer crunching numbers all day. But producing a fully fledged game, you will tell a story, even if it's something as simple and mechanical as, I don't know, say Tetris. Even Tetris had a huge story element in how it was marketed in different countries, for example. The reason Tetris got so big in America was because they had the Soviet branding that everybody thought was really interesting. And in order to get to that branding with Tetris, they would have to have a focus group and they would have to have creatives within the team who all gave their perspective to how they thought a game would be perceived by an audience. And you don't know how your game is perceived if there's only one group working. If you don't have women, if you don't have people of color, if you don't try to mix things up with the gender, ethnicity, and ability and just life experience in general, you're going to end up blind to how your game looks, blind to how the audience perceives it, which is extremely important when you're trying to sell a product. You need to know how the audience sees it. And you're going to end up maybe telling a story that you didn't intend, or you didn't want to get perceived like that, because you just don't know what it looks like from different eyes.
Exactly. And the target group that may be the most fitting one for your game isn't necessarily the one you set out to aim for, because if you have a very narrow scope, you don't really see the whole spectrum, and you might end up focusing on the wrong target group.
Yeah. You are underutilizing your skills to make a game. They're not going as used as they could be if you have a very narrow team.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be doing better. Speaking of games, you said you're not much of a gamer, but when you play games, what do you like?
Yeah, that's always a fun question to ask people in any industry. Like, do you enjoy playing around with the stuff you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would actually say, I don't know, did I say those exact words?
You said you're
I
not
probably
much
said I
of a
wasn't a
gamer.
hardcore gamer and not much on the AAA and sort of games that take you ages and ages to finish, because I can't.
600 plus hours of Radiant quests.
It's impossible. So I try to play like games that I can finish, like, everybody knows the Stanley Parable, that kind of games. Gone Home, I think maybe I even played that with your class, I can't remember. Anyway, right now I'm sticking mostly to mobile games, and I'm sort of sadly and embarrassingly hooked on Marvel Snap. But it fits very well because each round takes like 3 to 5 minutes, so it's easy, but at the same time it's frustrating as hell. And I was ill a couple of weeks back, and I didn't have much else to do, and normally when I'm ill and I actually have a legit excuse just to lie in bed and feel sorry for myself, I would watch some Netflix or something. But according to my phone, I played Marvel Snap for 6 hours and 17 minutes. So
it's got you.
It's embarrassing.
It has you.
Yeah.
You still in the free-to-play zone, though? You haven't bought any card packs? Or?
I bought one card pack, but it was a disappointment. So
I mean, that's still 6 hours and just one card pack bought. I'd say that's value for money.
Yeah, maybe.
They're probably mad that they can't get more microtransactions out of you.
I should actually, because I try to buy stuff, especially in mobile games, especially when it's from small developers, which is not the case here, because it's usually not much money. I mean, it's a matter of a couple of 100 kronas at the most, and it's so easy for us as consumers, whereas it counts a lot for the small publishers. So it's my little activism. I try to buy stuff actually, and sort of not be too hooked on the completely free stuff.
And it's sort of like a treat, right? You spend 80 kroner on the Candy Crush currency that I don't remember, but it's no different than going out and buying yourself a single bun and a coffee at 7-Eleven.
Exactly.
If it gives you entertainment, then it's worth it.
Exactly.
So Are there things that you are looking forward to when talking about games coming out or developments in the industry? Or you mentioned projects that you're hyped for?
Oh, wow, yes, all of the above.
Yes.
Well, I am very excited about this little project that I got funding for. It's tiny, and the funding is tiny.
Are you allowed to say what it is?
Yeah. It's the CEU. The CEU is a big coastal project creating cooperation between coastal universities all over Europe, and including like Portugal, Spain, France, Poland, Malta, and Norway. So we are the Norwegian representative, and they focus very much on, well, all sorts of things. Obviously, how it is to be living in a coastal area by the coast sea. That's why it's called CEU. But
got it.
C as in, yeah.
C.
But they also have, like, within their work packages, a lot of focus on inclusion and diversity, sustainability, and lots of good things that I just generally feel like that's very natural for us to embrace. So my project is called, I'm very proud of the name, it's called ICU, CEU.
ICU.
And it's obviously focusing very much on inclusion, diversity. It's got some buzzwords from the CEU application or the CEU project descriptions, including something like European identity, which I have to dig a bit deeper into to figure out what is, and obviously sustainability. But I think that sustainability is something that's quite natural to sort of include into everything anyway. And the way, it's a tiny little pot of money that we could apply for. I couldn't apply for the project that I would have wanted to apply for, which would run for years and years. And in the beginning, I tried to stretch it over 2 years, but I've realized I had to stretch it too thin then. So I ended up just making a 1-year project where we will carry out a few we'll invite some guest lecturers, we'll carry out few workshops, and then we'll tie it up to Greg's project. Me and Greg sort of wrote our application simultaneously and sort of thought about cooperating the whole time. And in Greg's part, his focus is more on, well, podcasts and social media.
Greg being the sound professional, I would say, or
yeah. He's our audio teacher.
Yeah, he's the sound wizard.
Yeah,
yes. His bit is more on social media, including podcasts, where we hope that we can take these focus areas and make them clear. Although his project will still sort of have a little bit of a broader scope, but in his application, he was also highlighting diversity, inclusion, sustainability, and so on.
Yeah. That is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a final note, because we have a little bit more time to kill here, we mentioned the indie scene earlier. And do you feel like, because the indie scene has really blossomed in this last decade or so, I think it started with Super Meat Boy back on the Xbox 360, around that age.
Yeah, I remember.
And it sort of just skyrocketed from there. Do you feel like the growth of the indie scene has sort of helped more women get into games? At least in terms of like game dev, because I mean, a lot of this, the horrible word, the toxic environment, that the women will have to face if they want to work in games a lot of the time, is subtracted a bit once you can sort of bring it home and you can work as a smaller, more concentrated group on a smaller, more personal project.
Well, I could say yes and I could say no. In a way, not in the beginning. Most of the initial indies were just dudes doing dude stuff with other dudes. So that, like, the fact that they were indie and an independent small company didn't necessarily in itself inherently lead to any automatic diversity or inclusion or anything like that. But as we have seen the indie scene develop, we see that, well, there's a concept called revenge companies. I don't know if you've heard that.
Revenge companies? Yeah. Is that when professionals leave their company in order to get full creative control that they didn't have before.
Yeah. And they sort of often go into competition with whoever they left. And that's those, we see a lot of women starting revenge companies like that. Maybe not so much in Norway. I mean, it's a tiny scene in Norway, but we see that internationally. So many of the successful, diverse indie game companies initially started out to some extent as revenge indies. It varies a little bit how focused their revenge efforts were, but the point is that many of them deliberately left a bigger company or a game developer or a company where they didn't feel included. They didn't feel that they had a clear career path. They didn't feel respected and so on, and made their own company, surrounded themselves with a more diverse workforce, and tried to effectively, purposely promote an inclusive work environment. So we see a lot of such indie game companies nowadays, and those actually seem to have done quite well. I don't have any statistics, but my guess and my sort of gut feeling tells me that if you take just sort of a random sample of indie game companies, that the indie game companies with the most diverse workforce are often the ones that are doing the best.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I do think there is a point about maybe not indie companies, but the fact that game development tools are so accessible and so free, among other things, could really help people who would have trouble getting a job just make their own projects. Yeah. I know several women personally who got into game development because they taught themselves how to make like Sims mods. Yeah. For example, that's kind of how I started. During lockdown, I was playing a lot of The Sims 4, and I was trying to make my own custom content, and then that led into making these pose mods that you can take pictures with. And then I applied for this course, and now in my second year, I think the fact that you can Google just how to make a box move in Unity 3D help and just to get started on your first single project makes it really accessible to people who don't need anything else.
It's true, it is accessible, but at the same time, there are a lot of social barriers. Yeah. Girls still, and this irritates me a lot, but still in 2023, girls in grammar school sort of will tell you if I go out and interview them, or if I just happen to chat with them or whatever, they will express notions sort of reflecting that technology isn't anything for them, and to sort of confirm their social their social placement or status or whatever, they will usually shy away from anything technological after the age of, 8 or 10 or something like that. Yeah. When I was doing my PhD research, this was probably in maybe 2014 or something, 2013, I was interviewing kids in schools about their use of games, and I interviewed 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 16 and 18-year-olds. And when I was just chatting with them, it was like 64 kids in total that I interviewed, and more or less half girls and boys. And the older the girls got, the more insistent they were on denying games altogether, flat out denying that they'd ever played any games, that they were ever interested in games, that they did know at all what games were. And then if I got sort of, if I could, it took me some curls and rounds to get to the point where I could actually get them to admit that they all had some games on their phones, if not elsewhere, and that they actually might have played some games elsewhere, at home or wherever before. But the older they got, the more sort of in denial, or at least they weren't going to admit it in front of their peers, that they were playing games, which is really sad. Because games are often a gateway into making creative technology. Yeah. Whereas the 8-year-olds, there was only one slight difference between the girls and the boys in the 8-year-old group. They were all very enthusiastic, talking about Minecraft and all the funny things that they were doing. Yeah. Or there were two slight differences. One of them was that the girls would more often talk about games that were like labeled typical girl games, like music making games and games with
dress-up
like
games.
dress-ups and things like that. And whereas the boys, only the boys would take up things like that they were playing games with too high age limit, so like between 16 and 18.
My dad lets me play Call of Duty, sort of.
Yeah, or my dad doesn't know I'm playing Call of Duty or GTA or whatever. So they were really proud because they were, these were peer groups, so they were talking in front of their peers, and they were really proud and sort of highlighting that fact that they were actually,
breaking rules,
being badass
so
rule
cool.
breakers. Yeah, 8-year-olds, by the way.
Yeah.
But the girls, they were just not interested, and they weren't either interested when the boys were showing off. It wasn't on topic for them.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. It's been very interesting to have you on.
Been interesting to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being interviewed.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the MediaNord podcast. Join us again next time, where we discuss what it's like to be a game student here at Nord. We'd also love to hear from you, our listeners, so please reach out to us on social media @MediaNord with your thoughts and feedback.